She came back to our 15-year reunion a widow. Her daughter pointed at me and said, "Mommy said you'd come." Ryan Callahan almost didn't go to the Millbrook High Class of 2010 15-year reunion. He'd RSVP'd yes back in March, mostly because his sister guilted him into it, but by the week of the event he'd talked himself out of it twice. Reunions had a way of measuring you against a version of yourself you'd stopped being a long time ago. At 33, he ran his own small woodworking business out of a converted garage, coached his nephew's Little League team on weekends, and lived a life that was, by most metrics, good and quiet and entirely his own. He didn't need 75 people. He barely remembered asking whether he'd settled down yet, their eyes flicking meaningfully toward his bare left hand. But his sister called him Friday night and said one sentence that changed his mind. "I heard Emily's coming." Ryan hadn't said her name out loud in probably 4 years. Emily Vance had been the first real love of his life, the girl he'd taken to prom in a rented tux 2 sizes too big, the girl he'd written actual letters to during her first semester away at college before the distance and their different lives quietly pulled them apart. They hadn't ended badly. They'd just ended the way a lot of 18-year-old relationships end, slowly, without a clean final conversation, until one day you realize you haven't spoken in over a year and you're not sure whose turn it was to reach out. He went to the reunion. He told himself it was for his sister. He knew, somewhere underneath that, it wasn't. The gymnasium Millbrook High's gym had been decorated within an inch of its life, maroon and gold balloon arches, a banner reading Millbrook High Class of 2010 15-year reunion strung above the old basketball hoops, string lights zigzagging across the ceiling where championship banners used to hang. It smelled exactly the way Ryan remembered every school dance smelling: floor wax, cheap cologne, and the faint ghost of teenage anxiety baked permanently into the walls. He'd been there maybe 20 minutes, nursing a drink and half listening to a former classmate describe his home renovation in excruciating detail, when he felt it, that specific, electric feeling of being watched. He turned toward the gym entrance. Emily stood in the doorway. She looked both exactly like herself and entirely different, the way people do after enough years have passed to change the shape of a life without changing a face you'd know anywhere. Her hair was longer. She wore a soft lavender dress, one hand pressed against her chest like she was steadying her own heartbeat before walking further into the room. And beside her, holding tight to her other hand, was a little girl, maybe 6 or 7, dark-haired, wide-eyed, wearing a cream cardigan over a maroon dress that Ryan would later learn Emily had picked specifically to match the school colors, because her daughter had insisted on matching Mommy's old school. Ryan's first thought was purely instinctive. The small, stinging math anyone does in that moment. She has a kid. She's married. Of course she is. His second thought, half a second later, was the realization that Emily wasn't wearing a ring. That her eyes, when they found his across the gym, held something heavier than nervousness, something closer to grief. He set his drink down and walked toward her before he'd consciously decided to. "Mommy said you'd come." He didn't get the chance to say hello first. The little girl let go of Emily's hand, walked straight up to him with the fearless directness only small children possess, tilted her head back to look up at him, and pointed one small finger squarely at his chest. "Are you Ryan?" He crouched down instinctively, the way he did with his nephew, bringing himself to her eye level. "I am." "What's your name?" "Lucy." She studied his face like she was checking it against a photograph in her memory. "Mommy said you'd come." Behind her, Emily made a small sound, not quite a laugh, not quite something else, and pressed her hand harder against her chest. "Lucy," she started. "Honey, maybe we should." "She has your smile," Lucy announced to Ryan, entirely unbothered by her mother's attempt to redirect her. "Mommy has a picture. From when you were young. You were at a dance, and you had a stupid tie. It was a clip-on," Ryan said, straight-faced. It was very sophisticated. Lucy considered this seriously and seemed to decide it was an acceptable explanation. Ryan stood back up slowly, and for the first time in 15 years he and Emily Vance actually looked at each other. "Hi, Ryan," she said quietly. "Hi," he said. "You look." He stopped himself before he said something too big for a gymnasium full of eavesdropping former classmates. "It's really good to see you." What Emily hadn't said in 15 years, they found a quieter corner near the old trophy case, Lucy occupying herself nearby with a plate of mini cupcakes from the dessert table, and Emily told him, in pieces, what the last 15 years had actually held. She'd met her husband Marcus in her senior year of college. A steady, kind man who'd made her laugh during a genuinely difficult year and never once made her feel like a project to fix. They'd married young, had Lucy 4 years later, built an ordinary, good life in a town 2 hours from Millbrook. Marcus worked in logistics. Emily taught second grade. It wasn't the life she'd imagined at 18, but it had been hers, and she'd loved it. 14 months ago, Marcus had a massive, undetected heart defect finally catch up with him on an entirely ordinary Tuesday evening while helping Lucy with her homework at the kitchen table. He was 34. There had been no warning, no history, nothing anyone could have caught. Emily became a widow at 33 with a 5-year-old who kept asking for months afterward when Daddy was coming home from his trip. "I almost didn't come tonight," Emily admitted, her voice low enough that it stayed between them. "I told myself for weeks I wasn't ready to see anyone from back then, that it would be too much too soon. And then Lucy found that photo of us, from prom, the one my mom kept in an old box, and she got so fixated on it. She kept asking who you were. I told her a little bit, just that you were someone important to me a long time ago. And she decided all on her own, in the very certain way 6-year-olds decide things, that we had to come find you." She let out a breath that was half a laugh. "I didn't have the heart to tell her that 15 years is a long time, that you might not even be here tonight, that you might have a whole life now that doesn't have room in it for a girl showing up out of nowhere with a kid in tow." Her eyes went a little glassy, but she told me, this morning, getting her shoes on, completely matter of fact, "Mommy, he'll come, I know it." Kids just believe things like that. I don't know where they get the certainty. Ryan looked over at Lucy, who had abandoned the cupcakes and was now attempting with great concentration to make a balloon animal out of a leftover decoration balloon, tongue between her teeth in focus. "I'm glad she was right," he said quietly. The rest of the night they didn't fall into each other's arms across the gym floor like some movie moment, and Ryan was grateful for that, because that wasn't what either of them needed. What happened instead was smaller and steadier. They talked for nearly 3 hours, while old classmates cycled past with hugs and updates and the occasional too loud "wow, you two remember prom?" Ryan and Emily sat at a folding table near the trophy case and talked like two people, carefully, deliberately getting to know each other again, not the 18-year-olds they'd been, but the people 15 hard, full years had made them into. Lucy fell asleep against Ryan's jacket, which he draped over the back of her chair without thinking twice, somewhere around hour 2, worn out from balloon animals and cupcakes and the general chaos of adult conversation happening over her head. Emily watched him gently adjust the jacket so it covered her shoulders better and didn't say anything, but something in her face shifted, soft, unguarded, the way you look at someone when you're allowing yourself, for the first time in over a year, to imagine what a future might look like instead of only grieving the one you lost. "I'm not looking for anyone to replace him," Emily said quietly, watching her daughter sleep. "I need you to know that. Marcus was a good man and Lucy's father, and nothing about tonight is about replacing that." "I'm not trying to replace anything," Ryan said. "I just want to know you again. However long that takes, however that looks. No timeline, no pressure. I meant what I said earlier. It's really good to see you." 6 months later, Ryan didn't rush anything, and that turned out to matter more than any grand gesture could have. He started small. A phone call every few days, then a weekend drive to visit. Careful and slow, always centered around what worked for Lucy, never around what he wanted the relationship to become on any particular timeline. It was Lucy, unsurprisingly, who moved things along faster than either adult intended. 3 months in, during a weekend visit, she asked Ryan point blank at the dinner table whether he was going to be her other dad now, with the same fearless directness she'd used to identify him across a crowded gymnasium. Ryan, caught completely off guard, looked to Emily for help and found her just as unprepared, both of them laughing despite themselves at how thoroughly a 7-year-old had cut through months of careful adult hesitation in a single sentence. "We'll see, Bug," Emily told her. "One step at a time. That's what grown-ups say when the answer is yes." Lucy informed her, entirely unbothered, and went back to her mac and cheese. She wasn't wrong, not yet, not officially, but the direction was clear to everyone at that table, including the 7-year-old who'd apparently known it since a hallway conversation about clip-on ties. By the time of the next Millbrook reunion, the 20-year, still 5 years off, Ryan fully expects Lucy to inform the entire gymnasium, unprompted and with total confidence, exactly what happened next. Some kids just know things before the adults around them are ready to admit them out loud. Sometimes all it takes is one small certain voice pointing across a crowded room to say the thing everyone else is too afraid to. Mommy said you'd come. She had, and he did. If this story hit you somewhere unexpected, you're not the only one. Sometimes the people who show up for us aren't the ones we planned for. They're the ones who were waiting all along for the right moment to walk back into the room. Like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, have you ever reconnected with someone from your past at exactly the right time?